let's talk about another badass there, Andrew Tate. You know who he is. And Dave wanted to talk about that in the light of emotional maturity.
Yeah, I think it's been fascinating for me watching Tate get to where he's gotten to, because I found his content at about the end of 2020 was when I first got into Andrew Tate, and I was going through a particularly difficult stage in my life, where a lot of things had I guess kind of derailed as fault of one, myself, and two, circumstance. And when I found Andrew Tate's content, for me, I guess I heard the things for me that were the most relevant, which was the message of saying the world is ultra competitive. You have more potential that you're tapping into, and you should start working harder to be the best version of yourself so that you can show up and have the best experience you possibly can in life. And for me, that was the message that resonated so strongly, and it was so inspirational in terms of, I guess, giving me this call to action in terms of being like, you don't need to work incredibly hard because you can get away with cruising, but you should work extremely hard because you've got the gift of life, you've got the gift of these opportunities, and you can do so much good with what you have. And it was when we were having a conversation about it, when you first brought this up, that I hadn't thought about it from this perspective, was what a different message people can take from people such as Andrew Tate, depending on their baseline level of emotional maturity. And there's another book that I often recommend to my clients called The Rational Male by Rollo Tomassi. And I did a book review of it a while ago in my group, and I mentioned that I said this is a very important book to read as long as you have the emotional maturity to understand what the goal outcomes is and what it's trying to say. And I think that the message is, and I guess this comes back to what we're looking at with psychedelics and testosterone as a whole, is that we all experience life through different lenses, and we all hear different things based on, I guess, what our predispositions towards things are. And I guess what you were talking about that kind of really saw me see this from a different perspective outside my own is how this message that he spreads may not end up being a productive or positive message if someone has certain predispositions and confirmation biases when hearing it.
Right.
Yeah. Again, well said. You know, I'm always going to preface that in everybody, there's the positive and the negatives. He's had a lot of positive messages, but there's also a lot of negative things that if you don't have the emotional maturity and you cherry pick the good messages, if you take the whole thing, that's when you really can get in trouble and follow a wrong path. But what I got more from the Andrew Tate story is he was able to tap into the malaise of all these young men who are really looking for a figure to tell them it's okay to be a manly man, a masculine man. There's so much talk about toxic masculinity that young men without the emotional maturity don't know where to turn, and they can be led very easily to the wrong path. So I feel that what we're doing here and our responsibility is to really show a face that everything you said, Dave, you need to work. You need to be self-motivated. You need to kind of get yourself into a place where you really can be self-dependent. Of course, always in connection with your other humans around you, but you need to have self-responsibility and take action for yourself. So what it really showed me, a lot of young men are lost. And if we look at the statistics of what's happening with our young men, there's an amazing book now, I forgot the author, The Boy Crisis. Our young men are in trouble. Young women are doing really well. You know, like now, young women are graduating, whether it's medical school, law schools, jobs, they are graduating at much higher levels than young men. A lot of high-level women will tell you they cannot find a man that can handle a strong woman. So you can see that men are having a problem keeping up. And when I say that, it's not every man, but we see a proportion of men who are getting there, and that proportion is only getting bigger. So I feel that there needs to be a very positive voice to really take the positive message that can be there, the self-reliance, the hardworking, all of those, but we package it and we make sure that through all this, you still are a respected person, a vulnerable man, somebody who can work with others. Again, that balance of yin and yang, that's the important thing. And again, our young men are suffering. We're doing all this. We talk about testosterone because testosterone is the first thing that usually may make men not act like they want to. We need masculine men. Toxic masculinity is real. there are those CAs that I talked about. So it's balancing that with the right energy.
Are the lower T levels in young men the explanation for the struggle of them in the society?
Multifactorial. This is such. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, sure. I'll go first. So, absolutely, I think it's multifactorial. I think one of the big things, because I work with a lot of younger guys, and one thing that I think is very interesting is that there's this cohort of guys coming up that aren't typically spoken about, which is that, you know, you get a guy who's, let's say around 25 years old, maybe younger, and he's doing everything right, like everything right to a point that it's excessive, and his testosterone levels still suck. And they're the guys who I think have real challenges, because I think, and this is just my hypothesis, that I think that, and when you talk to them, this is the impression you get, is that it's not like their testosterone levels decline super rapidly by the time they're 25. They never peaked in the first place. And I think if a man doesn't have that surge of androgens to nourish and saturate the receptors in his body and in his brain, it causes identity not to form properly, because testosterone is so important to antagonize the effects of stress and to create positive, motivating habits in terms of you're getting the reward for what you should be doing in terms of promoting dopamine transmission. So when a guy doesn't peak properly in terms of his testosterone levels when he's coming up, and other guys around him are, he's going to very quickly size himself up against the other men, and he's going to be at the bottom of the pecking order in the dominance hierarchy. And that is a very real thing. It's a felt thing. It's an evolutionary thing. And I think if you're a guy coming up and you've never walked into a room and just felt like the man, and you don't have that in your development, and you get to your mid-20s, your late 20s, you're probably not going to be where you want to be, and you're not going to be heading to where you want to go, because you're not going to have that period where you were fearless and where you were courageous and where you were, you didn't have these fears. You were anxious and highly strung all through your teenage years. And I think that's what we're getting a lot of now, is we're getting these guys who come through and they go on their testosterone and they get, a little bit down the line, and they go, well, I've been on this for 12 weeks, 16 weeks. Like, why don't I feel like a confident leader or whatever that they're wanting in terms of their subjective experience of what they think testosterone is going to do for them? And I explained to them, I say, look, well, it's kind of like you're just starting puberty. I mean, it's just something that's going to take years. We're not taking you back to where your body was before. We're not taking you back to where your levels were when you were 21. We're taking them to where they should have been. And that's going to take time to develop. And I think that's something which can be very profound for these guys, is helping them understand and going, this may be something that's going to take months and years, but this is something that's going to change the trajectory of who you are and who you're going to become. And I think that's the most exciting thing about testosterone, is that now we're able to give men the rewards that they should be getting and that they deserve. So when they train, they actually feel good. When they eat well, they actually put on muscle and lose body fat. They don't just get skinny fat. When they go to the gym, they actually can put on strength and size if they follow a proper program. And when you build all these things into a man's life and you give him the rewards that he deserves, he is going to go out and do all the things that his body and his mind were built to do.
Really?
Yeah. So true. And this is where, to me, this is one of the most important topics that we can talk about. And this cohort of men, like you said, Dave, that felt that they've never had that surge of testosterone. And we can, so first to answer your question, testosterone is an important part of this, but it's multifactorial. Our world has changed. So the world is no longer just a blue collar world anymore. There's fewer jobs where men have to be active. There's a lot more jobs where you're sitting at a desk. It's more where you use your brain. It's not as physical as it used to be. So just that decreases normal testosterone level. But where it goes further than this, and this is my area of interest, the endocrine disrupting chemicals that this generation, actually, I'm writing a book that's going to be called The Toxin Generation. How we went from the great generation after World War II, then we went to better living through chemistry, and we find ourselves 50 years later now with a toxin generation. So we've had guys, endocrine disrupting chemicals, they can cross the placental barrier and they can affect the fetus, the unborn male, and they never get the way a fetus, the fetus is female until it gets a surge of testosterone in the first trimester and turns into a male. So if the mother is exposed to some kind of plasticizer or pesticide, an anti-testosterone level, and you don't get that surge, It's called testicular dysgenesis syndrome. And you have a whole host of physical diseases that can happen, including undescended testes, lower sperm count, testicular cancer. And those are the physical signs. We haven't talked, like Dave said, about the psychological signs that you've never had this high surge of testosterone. And same thing in pre-puberty. If you're not exposed and you don't have that surge, so you never have those what we call masculine traits that you really feel it. So now we have a generation that finds itself that a big proportion of men have never had this, and they're trying to find a place in this new world. It is a new world that we have to have a lot of compassion for. And that's why that typical guy, Dave, 25-year-old, works out, takes the right supplements, tries to meditate, level's not perfect. He is lost unless he finds practitioners like us who can really understand and helps them. He is lost in the conventional medical world where he's been told it's in his head. Here's some depression medication. Now he internalizes that shame and never really able to self-actualize the potential that he had. So I think that's something we need to talk a lot about, that a lot of times it's not the men's fault. It could be something, you can't prove it, but it could be something you were exposed to in the womb that made a cascade of all this and creates now all this physical and psychological side effects. So a lot more compassion and a lot more tools to help those men.